influence of technology and personality resides a select group of individuals. Those individuals are known as technologists, and they put their thoughts on the line for you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of On the Line with Cohesity. Today, with the news talking so much about data disasters, we want to uncover what you need to be recovery ready. Think about this for a minute. When we consider data breaches, the average data breach is over 25,000 records. And the average time to identify a security breach is 279 days. What a delay. And security breaches aren't the only disaster we need to be thinking about. So we are going to be talking about having a recovery-ready mindset. My name is Theresa Miller. I'm the Director of Technical Advocacy here at Cohesity. And today I am joined by a very special guest, author of Just Do This. Can you introduce yourself?
I certainly can. As Theresa said, my name is DJ Eshelman, author of Just Do This, which is a book about IT methodology. And so kind of getting away from the technology side of things, more into the how do we do this kind of things.
I'm so glad to have you here and share your ideas and thoughts with our audience. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive into some of the questions I have for you today. I mean, I've read the book. It's really interesting, and I know a lot of the mindset that organizations need to have that come from this book, I think will be super useful. So there are a lot of potential risks that can impact our enterprise data. What are some of the data impact scenarios that businesses should be ready for?
You know, ultimately, there's you probably could list 1,000 of them. There's things like security, where you have, you know, people that have either bad actors or you know, whatever is going on there. We talked about the issues of data breaches and things like that, where you have ransomware or you just have attacks that are going on. That's being so frequent these days. There's countless examples every second, right? so that's a big one front of mind with a lot of people. And then the one that I think people think most frequently about, unfortunately, is natural disasters, which is odd because that accounts for only 5% of the outages that we experience worldwide as far as the data is concerned, or business continuity or disaster recovery is concerned. Natural disasters are about 5% of that. And so that really doesn't even play into the statistics at all anymore. And then you have also things like technology issues, like as far as like something went wrong with a piece of software, or maybe even sometimes like a network algorithm or something like that has disrupted part of the network, and that causes a cascade, like we saw with Facebook a couple of years ago. Things like that are very much a scenario of like, okay, what do we have as an impact there? And then you have other things that are just general impacts to the way we operate. There's a great book that is called The Goal, and that I think anybody in information technology should absolutely read, because they have a better understanding of what the business that they're working for should do. The business is there to make money. And if we can't do that because of whatever system has disrupted, then we are outside of the goal. And so that, as far as what it really comes down to, it usually is the making money piece. I personally have done a lot of work in healthcare, where the impact can even be greater than that. So it can affect care, and in some cases, even patient safety. And so as far as that goes, I think sometimes we think of the impact, and we need to be realizing that there are some human impacts to these outages as well that we need to be very, very aware of. And so as far as the potential risks, there's a lot of things we can say that we know about. But the other part about this that I really want people to understand as well is that you can try and prepare for everything, but that doesn't work. In the book, I talk about an example of Canadian police that were trained to spot counterfeits, not by looking at all the various types of counterfeits in the world, but by studying what their currency looked like and what should look like. And so as we do that as people, we can see, okay, here's what success looks like. And we know that that's the picture in our minds. Anything outside of that is what we're preparing against, because we know that's a variation. And so if we have that kind of mindset, it's like, can we prepare for everything? No, but we can know kind of the right ways to structure what we have so that we're ready.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example. It's one of those things you might not think of as you're planning, right? One of the other things that I went through that my team didn't think of when I was on the customer side in the enterprise was we had all these great plans, disaster recovery plans, and during the workday, a fire alarm went off. Our disaster recovery plan or our planning for data's disasters didn't account for the fact that everyone could be in the building. And so what happened is with the person who was supposed to trigger the plan, they couldn't get at their car because the parking structure was locked down to leave to go start, be prepared to fail over should a true fire be deemed actually occurring. So, so when I really think about potential risk to business, impact to data, you'll do your best, right? I think to your point, you'll do your best, but there are variables that you end up adjusting your processes for, like that. So let's talk about potential risk a little bit more. I know you just kind of started touching on it briefly. Potential risks can be variable, even with the unexpected. So what can organizations do, DJ, to really understand their blind spots and even identify them to be successful when planning for any data scenario that could have a negative impact on business operations?
Yeah, really. I mean, it starts with why, right? You really need to understand what the impact is of your business being down and what you're willing to do and spend to be able to make sure that continues. If you don't have that from the outset, then that really is the challenge. So my overall methodology has 4 phases to it. 1 is to understand, 2 is to plan, 3 is to change, and then 4 is to maintain. So when we're talking about things like this, we're usually talking about the maintain phase of this. But if you don't go through that planning process and be willing and able to constantly challenge that process as an iterative process, not as a static one, then you are already setting yourself up for risks for not doing that. And there's ways you can do this too. I mean, it's not like there's just one way to do it and that's it. You have some companies that just do like a yearly review, like they pull in a consultant and they'll say, okay, what kind of things can we do to say, okay, what impacts do we have if there's a loss of data, or if a fire alarm goes off and we can't get to what we need to, thinking about things in those kind of scenarios that maybe if you're too close to a situation, it's sometimes really difficult to think about. And so you have these kind of downstream impacts that you're not recognizing because you don't think in terms of that. You've already got tons of things you've already processed. Our brains are great machines, but ultimately they don't have the ability to process as much as we think they do at once. And so having other people to collaborate with you is probably one of the big keys there to understand. So you bring in people in to understand what the impact to people is. And that impacts workloads, applications, all these kind of things are kind of downstream from that. The other thing to do is really looking at prevention and the tools that are involved more from that methodology standpoint of saying, okay, what can we do as far as a process? What kind of goals do we have? What kind of rules are we going to be operating within? What kind of recovery time objective do we have, for example, when it comes to like flat out business recovery, that sort of thing? Mm-hmm. What is our objective? How long can we be down? What is our time to recovery? What is the amount of data that we need to have in a certain moment? How much data can we lose over a period of time before it has a detrimental impact to our businesses and processes, applications, that sort of thing? So we define all these kind of things as best we can. And then you're kind of going through a process of challenging those. Famously, Netflix has a program internally that they call Chaos Monkey. And
Hmm.
Chaos Monkey does is it tries to break everything. In other words, and this is why there's few teams that I can honestly say that I honestly admire their tenacity for this. But that's what they've done. They've said, okay, we have an entire team, and people call them like red teams or whatever, blue teams, all that kind of stuff. But they're outside of all that. They are actively trying to break everything they can at all times. So you can go to that level of extreme of having to be prepared for Chaos Monkey and having all your systems able to be recovered that rapidly and workarounds and all those kind of things that you need from a process perspective. Is that necessary? That's where you need to define that from a business perspective and a process perspective, saying, okay, if we have a why here on this side, on the other side of that, we need to have the process to match that. Otherwise, we're kind of in a losing scenario.
I love that. I think is that what would qualify as what might be termed as chaos engineering potentially? I don't know. I'm asking. I
Yeah.
think it's really interesting that and I think it's worth it from many, many different perspectives, including security. I have to assume security is part of that, right? Let's try to break it. Let's find our own flaws and improve the process. I think that's outstanding advice, and I hope our audience can take that and reflect on that if that's not something they're already doing. I don't think it's a common practice personally. So I could be wrong. Like maybe people will come back after this podcast and they'll be like, yeah, it is. We do that. But I know, at least from my perspective, enterprises I've worked in, as on the customer side, that was not standard practice. So I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing exposes a blind spot like being an expert.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's always something, if you're not in that mode of learning. Yeah.
You're too close to it. Yep. Yeah. You designed it, you architected it, you deployed it. You are way too close to it. Let somebody else come in and break it, so it can be better secured from the threats and vulnerabilities that can impact it.
It's very true. And I've so often been in situations in the end user computing space, especially where I've done the majority of my consulting and this sort of thing, where just something as simple as a software update can have these, kind of cascading effects. At one point, I remember we've already had those situations like Windows updates and things like that impact that. And what I tell people all the time is that you won't rise to the occasion. We have this romantic notion or whatever that we'll somehow like just face it and be brave and we'll rise above it. You don't rise above those kind of scenarios. What you do is survive them. And so you won't rise to the occasion. You'll only rise to your level of preparedness. And so when it comes to things like prevention and getting the right things defined and all that kind of stuff, really it comes down to daily practices for all your staff. And something that really is kind of a key, I think people need to understand too, is that if you just defer to a team, then you're at huge risk. I hate to have to say this, but even from the early 2000s, all of us in IT knew that the most people at risk of taking the entire company down were usually the C-level, because they usually had access to things that they really didn't understand what their access meant, but they always insisted on having it, right? And so going after social engineering and other things that have been successful in taking down a lot of these companies that we've seen lately, a lot of times they're directed at either the assistants or the direct C-level folks. And it's shocking how much time is spent trying to figure out what happened. And it turns out it was just some sort of social engineering attack, or even just an email that an executive clicked on. Right. And so really it comes down to, you cannot delegate this. It has to be something that everyone understands and has ownership of, and that level of extreme ownership needs to be company-wide, that we all care about this. So when it comes down to it, yes, spend money on the tools, yes, spend money on the process, but it's really crucial that you spend money making sure that everybody understands the reason for these risks and the reason why they're not to do workarounds, why they're to follow processes, things like that. Otherwise, you've got a chaos monkey and you don't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Really interesting. So, so let's just shift just slightly. I'm wondering if you could first just explain the difference between DR and business continuity, but then take that a step further. And let's talk briefly about what organizations can do around backup or disaster recovery planning to be best prepared.
Yeah, that feeds well into that, actually. So really, when it comes down to it, a lot of folks misunderstand what business continuity is versus just a backup strategy. And then misunderstand what a backup strategy is based on, or disaster recovery, that sort of thing. And so there's various levels of that. Business continuity should be a daily, hourly kind of a methodology saying, okay, if I want this business to continue, what kind of things do I need to be mindful of? What processes do I need to have in place? Which is a kind of a core with why I developed the methodology the way I do. It's understandable by everybody, right? It's not just like some super technical jargon. It's just like, these are words that everybody understands. Okay, we understand first, then we plan, then we change, and then we go into maintain, right? It's very simple. And so making sure that everybody understands that is really key. So when it comes to business continuity, there are just various things that happen. Even something as simple as a hardware failure, or something as innocuous as something. This happened to me last week. Somebody tripped over a cable in the data center and unplugged 5 servers without realizing it. It's very easy to do. And so that is not necessarily a disaster, but having the right redundancies in place, the right processes in place where that's a commonly practiced and ready is good business continuity.
I agree. Yep.
A lot of times, yeah, there's things like that where, I think one of the things that gets missed most often is kind of what you're talking about when you're talking about a fire that happens. And now all of a sudden nobody can get to the tools, it's like, okay, well, all of our plans just got vaporized just because of that one thing. And this happens a lot. We don't think of the human element of, this part of it. So we'll have redundant systems, but not redundant staff knowledge. And so this is actually something that I'm seeing more of than anything right now, where the biggest risk to a company is an administrator leaving because they're the only ones that know how to run something.
And that's a big challenge. You need redundancy across knowledge to be able to better flex and accommodate those types of changes. Wow.
Absolutely. And so it really does become having a good operational support plan that covers not just all these kind of processes, but has this mindset of, if we don't have this in place, if I can't bring someone in and say, here's our run book, here's what we do. If you don't have that defined, then you are at risk.
Right.
And that's just as much a business continuity risk. The stat was, I believe, 35% of downtime events were caused by human error by a study from Zeta in 2016. And that has actually increased, not decreased. It's easier to make mistakes when in a cloud world than it is in a physical world.
I agree.
So,
yeah.
So yeah, a lot of things like that to be aware of. The other problem is a lot of things about backups. A lot of people think of backups as something you do when there is a disaster or something like that. Well, the reality is most backups are actually recovering in the moment kind of things, and that has gotten a lot easier these days with shadow copy and things like that from Windows and some other technologies like that. But honestly, if you don't have a process where you can define, okay, how frequently are we backing up? What is our tolerance there? Those kind of things that matters in a day-to-day business operation just as much as it does in a disaster scenario. So I think a lot of times people don't realize that. But the other thing about backups that a lot of people don't recognize is the need for compliance. It actually, obviously I'm not going to name any names, but it shocks me sometimes how many times I'll go in to consult with an organization that is like publicly traded, and I find that they don't have an awareness of their requirements for compliance of these backups. So that's something to keep in mind, is like, especially for companies that are larger enterprises that are publicly traded and all those kind of things, you need to be aware of what things you need to know for compliance, not just for your staff needs and things like that. You might be legally required to do certain things.
Yeah.
And then, of course, disaster recovery is what we hope never will happen. You know, we hope that we never have an event that takes out an entire data center or entire city or things like that. But you have to be ready to plan for things like that too if you want your business to continue. This has gotten a lot easier, you know, and obviously, you know this,
Uh-huh.
as we've gone to the cloud, it's become a lot easier to have recoverable data, which I think is the key. And really, when I wrote this book, even in 2019, we were just coming to understand how to work with these tools. We had okay, we can get data up into the cloud. Yeah, then what? You know, not having the ability to actually use that data was kind of the key. And we're in a different world now, where now with the right technologies and things like that, we can do it live. We can do it in as far as like an ordered plan. There's a lot of things we can do, but having that covered is still crucial. You know, you still need to be ready for a disaster event. You know, it doesn't matter where you live. There's always something that can happen, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And obviously working for Cohesity, I mean, the whole backup, to me, it's always about planning for recovery, whatever scenario you want to be in, regardless of where your data is, even in the cloud, have the right tools to do recovery. So everything you were sharing was
And
ringing true.
I think a lot of things that are kind of the modern disaster that people aren't recognizing, and as we're recording this, we're watching this play out in the news right now, is how things like viruses, you know, Trojans, ransomware. Yeah, if you don't have the ability to basically stand up your business in a new place, you might be stuck.
Yeah.
And so having a protected area to where you can continue operating your business, that might be more crucial than you think. And sometimes it's not a physical disaster. Sometimes it is something that just, you know, spreads throughout the system and takes everything out, and you can't get it back. You know?
Yeah.
This is the world we're living in.
It
And
is.
it's unfortunate, but it's true.
It is. Well, we're at time. So, DJ, could you just share one key takeaway with the audience before we wrap up?
Honestly, I think the point that I'm trying to shout from the rooftop and the mountaintop, or whatever top I can find to top, is that the processes that your people have matters. The technology is great and the technology is needed, but without the right kind of tools in your mind to actually do that, and without the right agreement of the team of how we do this as a team, then that really is that point of failure that's more of a big concern for me. And so that is the reason why I'm doing everything I'm doing these days, trying to enhance that understanding of people, because honestly, it's really the method towards success these days. It's not just about what you know technically. It really is how you apply that technology into the real world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Makes sense. And thank you for sharing all of your insights today. For those of you listening in, if you're interested in DJ's book, you can go out to thrive-it.com/CO23, and you can take a look. So thanks again, DJ. And thank you to our audience.
Thank you.